Hello there, this is Simon Puente along with Martin Halomo, EDCI 8321, Dr. Lou. Chapter 2, Understanding How Aging and Culture Affect Motivation to Learn. How does age and culture affect a learner's motivation? Released from comparison with youth, old can be hip, powerful, and aesthetic. Old is rhythm and blues. Old is marching with Martin Luther King Jr. Old is hearing a scratchy vinyl record of Edith Piaf singing lyrics of love and loss, and knowing from your own life she's telling the truth many times over. Old is Michelangelo's David. Old is the Kama Sutra. And old is the Taj Mahal. As James Hillman writes, when old gains its definition only by pairing, it loses its value. In a culture that has only identified with new, old gets the short end of the comparative stick, and it becomes ever more difficult to imagine oldness as a phenomenon apart from the lazy simplicities of conventional wisdom. In fact, the word old derives from an Indo-European root that means to nourish. In medieval times, old meant fully nourished or matured. Not that old is better than young or new, old is its own thing, certain to be humbled by aging and death, but also to be affirmed for the character, perspective, and vitality it can offer to life among all ages. Old is the nurturance of grandparents, the guidance of mentors, and the stories carried through our families that give us an identity and a sense of connections with all living things. As we will see in this chapter, older adults are a rapidly growing group among adult learners, and their characteristics and needs enrich and challenge adult education. In today's agenda, we'll discuss characteristics of adult learners, specific effects of aging, location of responsibility for learning, cultural diversity and macrocultural perspective, two critical assumptions for helping adults want to learn. It is a bit frustrating but understandable that in the field of adult education, there is no agreement on the definition of adult. Some cultures regard puberty as entry into adulthood, whereas others use legal codes to permit and promote adult behavior. In the United States, people can vote at 18 but cannot drink until 21, and in particular instances, can be tried in courts as adults at 14. Chronologically, adults can be divided into three groups: younger adults, 18 to 24, working age adults, 25 to 64, and older adults, 65 and older. Most research and theory in the field of adult education pertains to working age adults, who are assumed to work at least part-time while going to school. The focus of this book is on working age adults, non-traditional college students, and older adults. Among 25 and older, approximately 12% are ethnic or racial minorities. All these groups of adult learners share a common goal. They want to use the knowledge and skills they acquired to enhance their careers or professional opportunities for better jobs, higher salaries, coveted promotions, or simply staying competitive. Because they often are in a position to choose what they learn, older adults are more likely to find learning intrinsically motivating. There's also many myths and stereotypes about older people, frequently negative ones. Let's take a closer look. It was once thought that aging was a barrier to learning. Improved sanitation, nutrition, hygiene, and advances in medical drugs and treatments have increased life expectancy in most industrialized countries. As of 2006, the average life expectancy in the United States was 77.8 years. Since the early 1990s, it has been documented that people remain more active and feel physically better for longer in their older years. There are significant culturally related differences as people age. For example, women live longer than men. As we grow older, women eventually outnumber men by more than 2 to 1. Racial ethnic minorities do not age well, since decrease indicates some of the disparities in income, living environments, disease exposure, and available medical care between the majority population of this country and its racial ethnic minorities. Although racial inequalities persist, becoming older does not mean automatic physical, emotional, or health deterioration. And the effects of aging differ from person to person. As people reach their 40s and 50s, they undergo changes in vision, cardiovascular and respiratory functioning, reproductive potential among women, and muscular and skeletal resilience. Compensation can offset this deterioration. Eyeglasses, hearing aids, medications, increased illumination, and increased time for learning are some of the ways to equalize learning opportunities for older adults. Although considerable individual differences exist, the intellectual capacity to learn declines only modestly until most people are in their 80s. The combination of physical exercise, stimulating environments, and continued learning appears to be able to increase brain cell growth and connections throughout life. Older learners may require more time to learn new things because, on the average, their reaction time is lower than that of younger learners. Allowing older adults to control the pace of educational experiences and their exposure to educational materials is an excellent strategy to accommodate any decrease in reaction time. The normal physical changes of the eyes can be accommodated through the use of eyeglasses and brighter light. Attending to the acoustic environment and moderating the speed of presentation and verbal delivery can help older adults adjust for this sensory loss. Rather, intelligence seems to make more sense and be a much more useful concept when understood as consisting of multiple factors or a number of different intelligences. Standardized intelligence measures such as the WAIS 3 or early WAIS R are very academically oriented rather than being sensitive to an adult's capacity to solve real life problems. Their narrow framework, cultural bias, and low correlation with work performance caution against using these standardized intelligence tests to make decisions about most adults. If we understand intelligence as the ability to solve problems or to fashion products that are valued by one's culture or community, we realize intelligence cannot be conceptualized apart from the context in which people live. Thus, there exist multiple ways to be capable and to demonstrate intelligence. According to Howard Gardner, people have the capacity for at least 8 intelligences. Individuals differ in the strength of these intelligences. Some perform best when asked to manipulate symbols of various sorts, linguistic and logical mathematical intelligences, whereas others are better able to demonstrate their understanding through a hands-on approach, spatial and bodily kinesthetic intelligences. Rather than possessing a single intelligence, people have a profile of intelligences that combine to complete different tasks. This means that tools and techniques are a part of one's intelligence and its use. The crucial question then is not how intelligent is one, but how is one intelligent? Day in and day out, what is called practical intelligence may be for most people the paramount intelligence during the adult years. Practice as opposed to theory, direct usefulness as opposed to intellectual curiosity, and commonplace, every action or thought with immediate, visible consequences. It seeks to do, to move, to achieve something outside of itself, and works towards that purpose. When applied in a particular domain, practical intelligence is often referred to as expertise. As such, practical intelligence is often based on prior experience. In the particular area of expertise, most experts show quick, economic, problem solving and superior memory. Robert Sternberg is a leading scholar and researcher in the area of practical intelligence, which he views as what most people call common sense. According to him, being successfully intelligent involves thinking analytically, creatively, and practically, and choosing effectively how and when to use these abilities. The main component of practical intelligence is tacit knowledge. Knowledge that reflects the practical ability to learn from experience and to apply the knowledge in the pursuit of personally valued goals. Practical intelligence is a promising area of research for adult education. Understanding this ability may help people to develop greater capacity for effective performance in their careers and avocations. Daniel Goleman joined the forum about multiple intelligences with his advocacy for emotional intelligence. According to Goleman, to be successful in life, one must sensitively use the 5 domains of emotional intelligence: knowing one's emotions, managing one's emotions, motivating oneself, recognizing emotions in others, and handling relationships. Researchers who have studied emotional intelligence in the workplace have found it to be a promising construct. Current research and theory suggests that intellectual capacity during adulthood is a combination of genetic expression, experience, and knowledge that displays continued growth and highest potential in culturally relevant real-life situations. As adult educators, we can explore these rich ideas with the human intellect and use them to enhance our educational practices, but with a constant critical understanding. Working memory, the initial processing and storing of information that occurs within approximately 5 to 30 seconds, becomes more problematic as adults age. A common example is increasing difficulty remembering several new names just after being introduced at a party. Generalizing about long-term memory, the capacity for retaining information for minutes or years, is complicated. As people get older, they have more problems transferring and coding information into long-term memory. They also have more difficulty retrieving memories. Older adults appear to process information more slowly, especially when it is complex. They also seem less inclined to seriously consider material they see as irrelevant or confusing. When information is learned well and new material is integrated with prior knowledge, older adults remember and use this knowledge into old age. Age differences in memory are far less dramatic when material is familiar and meaningful. Retention of factual knowledge, such as vocabulary or news events, shows little, if any, decline from young adulthood through old age. Generally, older learners are likely to have the most problems with initial learning and subsequent recall when learning activities are fast-paced, complex, and unusual. They usually are not as efficient as younger adults in acquiring, organizing, and recalling new information. Pat Cross has made several practical suggestions for helping older adults with memorization. 1. Present new information in ways that are meaningful and relevant. 2. Include aids such as mnemonics, advanced organizers, and checklists to help older adults organize and relate new material to prior knowledge. 3. Present at a pace that permits mastery in order to strengthen long-term memory. 4. Present one idea at a time and minimize competing intellectual demands. And summarize frequently to facilitate organization and retention. To this list, I would add 6. Encourage taking notes on any items of interest. And 7. Facilitate the application of the new information to relevant issues and problems as soon as possible. Participation, undertaking learning projects, courses, and programs, has a long history of research in adult education. Adult participation is usually due to a life transition that motivates the person to want to learn. The decision to participate in learning at a particular time is triggered by a specific life event. 85% of all the adults in her study named a career transition such as changing or advancing their career. In seeking education, adults in her study looked at primarily for quality, program, faculty, course or degree, and convenience, location, schedule, length of time to complete the program as criteria for selection. In general, life transitions and triggers vary culturally. Unequal access to wealth and power is a foremost explanation for some adults lower educational aspirations. There is little doubt that such social factors as unemployment, schooling, home background, government support for and or neglect of education, and provision of education in languages other than English powerfully affect the consideration of formal learning for adults. The impact of culture on the human perspective is formed by a complex interaction. We each construct our own reality by interpreting the external world on the basis of our unique experiences with it and our beliefs about those experiences. The diversity of individual brains is infinite. In adult education, research on cultural diversity usually focuses on age, gender, race, ethnicity, and income relative to access to and success in higher education. This information is extremely important, especially for program and policy decisions. In the classroom and distance learning, we need to go further than statistics and generalizations about cultural groups to respond to cultural diversity. We need to see adults as individuals with complex identities, personal histories, and unique living contexts. Culturally, a person has a variety of identities that are woven into a personal history and lived in an individual context. The foremost challenge of education and training is to create equitable and successful learning environments for all learners. Realistically, accomplishing this goal means respecting the cultural integrity of every learner while enhancing every learner's motivation in learning. The carrot and stick remains the most popular metaphor for motivation in this society. It is constantly used by the media, offered as an analytical tool by political pundits, and referenced by educators. For learning, the emphasis is on the use of extrinsic rewards such as grades, eligibility, and money. When learners do not respond to these incentives, they are often seen as responsible for their lack of motivation. The question many instructors ask is, how do I motivate them? As though the adult learners are inert. Such a question implies that these learners are inferior, somehow less able, and certainly less powerful than the instructor. Instructors who use an intrinsic and macrocultural approach to motivation consider the learner's perspective fundamental, because learning is a human act of making meaning from experience. Involving all learners requires us to be aware of how they make sense of their world and how they interpret their learning environment. A construct as broad and as complex as motivation invites controversy and argumentation. I offer the following assumptions so that you can better understand why I have chosen the ideas for instruction that follow. The first assumption is that if something can be learned, it can be learned in a motivating manner. People must be motivated to some degree to formally learn anything, even if the result of that motivation is merely paying attention. Before adults can learn anything, someone or something has to gain their attention. The second assumption is that every instructional plan also needs to be a motivational plan. The variables that interfere with and complicate learning are human variables, people's needs, emotions, impulses, attitudes, expectations, irrationalities, beliefs, and values. A plan can remind us of what to do and when to do it and show us where we might possibly flex and adjust along the way. This book offers a method of planning so that instructors may be inspired to reflect on and to act on challenging realization that it is how we choose what we do and how we approach it that will determine whether the sum of our days adds up to a formless blur or to something resembling a work of art.